It all began on a cold winter night in Paris back in 2008. Garrett Camp, a Canadian entrepreneur best known as the co-founder of StumbleUpon, found himself frustrated while trying to hail a taxi. The long wait, the unpredictability, and the inefficiency of the system sparked an idea in his mind. What if, instead of waiting on the street, people could press a button on their phone and instantly get a ride? Garrett couldn't shake this vision, and soon he shared it with Travis Kalanick, a fiery and ambitious entrepreneur who had already made waves in Silicon Valley. The two realized they were sitting on an idea that could reshape urban transportation forever. In 2009, their concept took form as UberCab, a small startup in San Francisco. At first, the app wasn't designed for everyone. It targeted the luxury black car market, allowing riders to book professional drivers with just a few taps. But even in its earliest days, it was clear that this wasn't just about luxury. It was about convenience. For the first time, you could see your driver's car approaching in real time on a map, know the estimated wait time, and pay automatically without fumbling for cash. Word spread quickly, and soon UberCab wasn't just a startup, it was a glimpse of the future. But the moment Uber started rolling out, the shockwaves were immediate. The traditional taxi industry, which had operated largely unchanged for decades, suddenly had a serious threat. Riders loved the simplicity and transparency. They no longer had to stand on a corner waving at yellow cabs, hoping to get lucky. They could simply open the app, request a car, and have it arrive at their doorstep. Fares were often cheaper, cars were cleaner, and drivers were more professional. For customers, it felt like magic. For taxi unions and regulators, it felt like war. Protests erupted in cities like San Francisco and New York, where cab companies argued that Uber was bypassing licensing laws and stealing business. In many cities, local governments rushed to crack down on the company, trying to defend traditional cab systems. But the public response told a different story. People didn't want the old way anymore. They wanted Uber. Every battle Uber faced only seemed to make it stronger, building its reputation as the rebellious tech startup willing to challenge outdated industries. Fueled by this momentum, Uber began one of the most aggressive expansions Silicon Valley had ever seen. The company adopted what came to be known as a blitz-scaling strategy. Grow first, worry about the consequences later. Within just a few years, Uber had moved beyond San Francisco and was launching in major US cities, from Los Angeles to New York. But it didn't stop there. Travis Kalanick, who had become the face of the company, had global ambitions. His mantra was simple: Uber should be everywhere. By 2013, Uber was operating internationally, from London to Paris to Mumbai. Each launch followed the same pattern. Roll out quickly, attract riders with low prices, flood the market with drivers, and when regulators pushed back, fight tooth and nail to stay alive. Investors loved the boldness. Billions of dollars poured into Uber from venture capital firms and private investors who believed the company wasn't just a startup. It was the future of transportation itself. Yet behind the scenes, this rapid growth came at a cost. Employees described an atmosphere of constant pressure where winning mattered more than anything else. The company wasn't just disrupting an industry, it was bulldozing it through cities, governments, and long-standing laws. Travis Kalanick summed up Uber's philosophy with one phrase: always be hustling. Uber had officially become a global giant, but as it conquered city after city, storm clouds began to gather. The very same aggressive tactics that fueled its meteoric rise would also lay the foundation for its biggest scandals. Inside Uber's offices, the atmosphere was unlike any traditional company. The motto was clear: grow at all costs. Employees worked in a culture defined by speed, aggression, and relentless ambition. Travis Kalanick fostered a battlefield mentality where every market was a war zone and every competitor was the enemy. For many, it felt like a startup on steroids: sleepless nights, constant pressure, and an obsession with beating both taxis and rivals like Lyft. This intensity became Uber's secret weapon, but also its greatest weakness. In the rush to dominate globally, little thought was given to sustainability, ethics, or the human cost. While investors admired Uber's skyrocketing valuation, cracks were forming beneath the surface. And nowhere were those cracks more visible than in the treatment of the very people who kept Uber running: the drivers. From the start, Uber insisted that drivers weren't employees but independent contractors. On paper, this gave them flexibility. Drive when you want, stop when you want. But in practice, it often meant no job security, no health benefits, and no safety net. Many drivers complained of long hours, decreasing pay rates, and rising expenses like gas and car maintenance. The more Uber expanded, the more it slashed fares to attract riders, leaving drivers struggling to earn a decent living. Across the globe, protests erupted. In London, drivers clogged the streets demanding better pay. In New York, drivers staged strikes outside Uber's offices. In India, Brazil, and beyond, lawsuits and labor disputes piled up. Uber's pitch of "be your own boss" quickly began to sound hollow as more drivers revealed they were earning less than minimum wage after expenses. The backlash was growing, and Uber's reputation was beginning to suffer. As if driver unrest wasn't enough, the company was soon caught in one of its most controversial scandals, a secretive program known as Greyball. Behind the scenes, Uber had developed sophisticated software that could identify government officials and regulators who might be trying to catch the company operating illegally in cities where it wasn't licensed. Greyball worked like this. If Uber suspected a user was a city inspector, the app would feed them fake cars, making it impossible for them to hail a real ride. It was a digital cloak and dagger operation designed to outsmart the law. For a while, it worked, allowing Uber to operate in markets where regulators were trying to shut it down. But when the existence of Greyball became public in 2017, the fallout was explosive. Headlines blasted Uber for deliberately deceiving governments. Critics argued this wasn't innovation, it was outright cheating. For many, Greyball became the symbol of Uber's reckless culture, a company so obsessed with winning that it bent or broke every rule in its path. And with drivers protesting on the streets, regulators circling, and the press exposing its darkest secrets, Uber's empire was beginning to look unstable. The rise had been extraordinary, but the scandals were only just beginning. The cracks in Uber's armor widened in 2017 when a single blog post rocked Silicon Valley. Susan Fowler, a former engineer at Uber, published a detailed account of her time at the company, exposing rampant sexual harassment, ignored complaints, and a workplace culture that seemed to reward bad behavior. Her words painted a picture of a toxic environment where HR looked the other way and leadership protected high performers, no matter their misconduct. The blog post went viral almost instantly, sparking outrage not only among Uber employees but across the tech world. For years, whispers had circulated about Uber's cutthroat culture, but Fowler's account made it impossible to ignore. Suddenly, investors, regulators, and the public were asking hard questions about what was happening behind Uber's glossy app interface. The company, once celebrated as a tech darling, was now becoming the poster child for Silicon Valley excess and dysfunction. At the same time, Uber's external battles were heating up. Governments across the globe were tightening the noose. In London, regulators threatened to ban Uber altogether, citing safety and compliance concerns. In Germany and Spain, courts ruled against its business model, forcing the company to suspend services. In the United States, states like California began pressing for drivers to be recognized as employees rather than contractors, striking at the core of Uber's business model. Everywhere Uber went, lawsuits followed. It was no longer just a company fighting the taxi industry. It was fighting governments, labor unions, and its own reputation. Each new ruling, each new fine, chipped away at the unstoppable image Uber had built. Investors began to worry. Was the company too reckless to survive in the long run? The mounting scandals and regulatory chaos eventually reached a breaking point at the very top. Travis Kalanick, Uber's co-founder and CEO, had always thrived on controversy. He projected the image of a fearless disruptor, a man who would rather apologize later than ask permission. But his brash leadership style, once celebrated, was now dragging the company into deeper trouble. Board members grew restless. Investors started demanding accountability. And as Uber faced one scandal after another, from Greyball to Susan Fowler's revelations to viral videos of Kalanick berating an Uber driver, it became clear that change was unavoidable. In June 2017, under intense pressure from the board and major shareholders, Travis Kalanick was forced to resign as CEO. It was a stunning fall. The man who had built Uber into a global powerhouse was suddenly out, undone by the very culture he had created. For many, Kalanick's resignation marked the end of Uber's wild, rule-breaking startup era. But it also raised a new question. Could Uber survive without its controversial founder? With Travis Kalanick gone, Uber tried to reset its image. But the damage had already been done. The scandals, the lawsuits, the toxic culture, they had left scars that couldn't be erased overnight. In 2017, a movement began online under the hashtag #DeleteUber, encouraging riders to uninstall the app in protest of the company's behavior. Within days, more than 200,000 users deleted their accounts, a staggering show of public backlash. Uber suddenly found itself facing something far worse than taxi unions or regulators: a loss of trust. Customers questioned the company's ethics, drivers felt alienated, and competitors like Lyft capitalized on the chaos by branding themselves as the friendly alternative. For a company that had built its empire on disruption, this was uncharted territory. Uber wasn't just fighting legal battles anymore, it was fighting for its very reputation. Still, the wheels kept turning. In 2019, Uber took the bold step of going public with one of the most highly anticipated IPOs in Silicon Valley history. Expectations were sky high. This was supposed to be the moment when Uber cemented itself as one of the great tech giants. But when trading began, the reality was sobering. Uber's stock stumbled right out of the gate, becoming one of the worst-performing IPOs of its size. The numbers told a grim story. Uber was losing billions of dollars annually despite its massive revenue. Investors began to realize what critics had long argued. Uber's business model was built on heavily subsidizing rides to undercut competition, but profitability was nowhere in sight. The company had disrupted the taxi industry, yes, but it still hadn't figured out how to make money doing it. What was once Silicon Valley's golden child was now a giant with shaky legs. And hovering over all of this was a much bigger debate: the future of work itself. Uber had not only changed how people got around, it had redefined what it meant to have a job in the modern economy. The company's insistence that drivers were independent contractors, not employees, became a lightning rod for controversy. On one hand, it gave people flexibility, the ability to work when they wanted, without a boss. On the other, it stripped them of protections like health insurance, paid leave, and job security. This debate spread far beyond Uber. It ignited conversations about the entire gig economy, from food delivery apps to freelance platforms, and whether workers in this new system were being exploited. Governments and courts around the world wrestled with the question: should gig workers be classified as employees, or was this new model here to stay? Uber, once seen as a transportation company, suddenly found itself at the heart of a global labor movement. The company had wanted to reinvent mobility. Instead, it had sparked one of the most important debates of the 21st century about fairness, workers' rights, and the future of capitalism itself. Today, Uber is no longer the wild startup it once was. Under the leadership of Dara Khosrowshahi, the company has tried to move past its scandals and rebuild trust with both riders and drivers. The focus has shifted from pure disruption to stability and long-term growth. But the road ahead is anything but simple. To survive, Uber has diversified beyond ride-sharing. Uber Eats, its food delivery arm, has become a major part of the business, in some markets even outpacing ride-hailing. The company is also betting heavily on technology, investing in artificial intelligence and self-driving cars, hoping that one day human drivers might be replaced altogether, eliminating its biggest cost. It's a bold vision, but one still fraught with challenges. The bigger question is whether Uber can ever truly be profitable while keeping both riders and drivers satisfied. Fares have risen in many cities, leading to frustration among customers who once loved Uber for its affordability. Drivers continue to fight for better pay and recognition, with new labor laws in places like California and the UK reshaping the business model. Meanwhile, competition is fiercer than ever, from regional ride-hailing apps to global delivery giants. And yet, despite all the turbulence, Uber remains one of the most recognizable names in tech. It has become more than just an app. It's a verb, a symbol of how quickly technology can transform everyday life. Few companies in history have grown so fast, fallen so hard, and still managed to stay standing. The untold story of Uber is not just about a startup that disrupted taxis. It's about ambition without limits, innovation without rules, and the price that comes when a company decides to move fast and break everything. Uber's rise and scandals show us both the power and the peril of Silicon Valley's dreamers. The journey isn't over. Uber's future may lie in food delivery, AI, or even flying cars. But one thing is certain, the company that began as an idea on a cold night in Paris has forever changed how the world moves, and how we think about work, technology, and the cost of disruption.